Hello and welcome to our new series. It's called Plundering the Past, and it's reviews of books related to Blood and Plunder. I'm Dan, and I'm here with my other nerdy host, Joseph.
Hello, hello.
And we're basically starting this new mini series. We're aiming to put this out in between podcasts. This was inspired by a 20 to 45-minute section by a crew member who shall not be named, where he went on a tirade for books. And while it was a really good segment, we thought it would be more appropriate to kind of scooch it over here. That way, there's more meat and potatoes for direct plunderness in the main Blood and Plunder podcast. And this is where we can come and talk about our books that we read because we're already reading the books anyway.
Tirade seems a little strong, but okay.
Hey, don't incriminate yourself. I said,
listen,
shall not be named.
lots of good books out there.
There's tons of good books, tons of good information. And, in both of our opinions, a historical game is more fully enjoyed when you know all the history behind it.
I don't know all the history, but yeah, it certainly brings the characters to life if you know a little bit about them, and makes force building more interesting, and brings the whole game alive in a great way. And Blood and Plunder does really focus on making the history come to life, and digging a little deeper is always fun for those of us so inclined.
So this week we're kind of starting on Baby's first, pirate book. If you're unfamiliar with the era, this is kind of a good starting point. Joseph was kind enough to send it to me, and then I breezed through it.
You ate it up. I'm impressed how fast you get through books when you start it.
Yeah, like I was saying, it's like someone threw like those tigers at the zoo, and they throw a pumpkin full of ground beef in their enclosure. That's kind of what it was for my brain. I just kind of latched on and really, really enjoyed it. It was awesome. You want to tell us which book we're reviewing this week?
Yeah, we're starting with The Republic of Pirates by Colin Woodard. The subtitle in faithful 18th century fashion is Being the True and Surprising Story of the Caribbean Pirates and the Man Who Brought Them Down. This is a 330 page book, pretty easy reading. You can get it for $20 on Amazon or $15 for the ebook Kindle version, or you can get it on Audible, which is I think one of the best ways to enjoy this book. I don't know how much it costs, just one credit, but it's a 13-hour listen on Audible, published in 2015 by Mariner Books. Colin Woodard, I don't know much about him. I looked him up today, and he has a handful of historical titles to his credit, mostly looking at U.S. history before 1800, it looked like.
Yeah, it was a pretty good book. I really enjoyed it. I tend to be someone I've been into pirate history since like high school. I don't even know what year that was, before 2011 at least, like junior high actually. So just when I thought that I kind of knew everything there was to know, this book had a lot of new tidbits that I was completely unaware of.
Yeah, I listened to this first when about 3 years ago, when I was kind of helping out with the Raise the Black expansion from Blood and Plunder. Firelock had me work on that with him a little bit. So this was a good introduction to that 18th century era. So it's really looking at like 1700 to 1732. Nice overview, and it kind of structures the book around several main characters, and New Providence Island and the port of Nassau specifically. Um, Looks at Jennings, Blackbeard, Vane, Hornigold, and Woodes Rogers, the man who brought them down, and kind of uses those characters as good examples, and helps walk through the era using those guys.
So the flow of the book is pretty easy to track. It kind of gives you a beginning to end kind of deal. It starts off with Granddad Henry Avery in 1696. He showed up in Nassau, sold the ship, sold a bunch of stuff to the governor, and then got the heck out of Dodge. So it kind of prepped Nassau for future piracies. As it was always kind of a little backwater-ish, but he kind of set it up, in black sails, and they say, Henry Avery put his flag here and said this is for free men. That's kind of what they were alluding to.
Yeah, it was fun to read the little bit of the history of New Providence and how it was a decent little colony, but it got hit hard several times and was kind of a total wreck and ripe for somebody to take advantage of, just because most of the people were gone. They were super poor, so a good place for pirates to set up shop.
And I had no idea that Avery came back to the Caribbean. Like, I never heard of that scenario before, so I thought that was super fitting. And he always, as you're going through the book, he always alludes to Henry Avery's ship rotting just across the bay.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of history reading on Avery yet, but looks like that one little stop off was pretty influential in how the future of Nassau proceeded.
So it starts off with Henry Avery coming back and basically kind of prepping it. It goes in the background of the main players, so your Navy men, your merchantmen, and your eventual privateers. And then it leads straight up into Queen Anne's War. You want to kind of go into that, Joseph?
Yeah, these are just the chapters we're looking at real quick to overview the book. Queen Anne's War. A lot of these guys who would become pirates were employed either as privateers or in a crew of privateer or navy ship. Focuses a lot on Woodes Rogers in this chapter and his privateering, especially his South Sea trip and attacking the Manila galleon. Um, he's a pretty interesting character with a lot of ups and downs, and he had some of his more glorious events before going to Nassau, and taking this Manila galleon was one of those. Now, that's a pretty fun battle there. I've been working on a scenario for Blood and Plunder with Rogers versus the Manila galleon, which I think could be fun eventually. But this war kind of, everybody, this gets talked about a lot, but all these guys employed either in defense or attack of different nations. Once the war ended, then that released a lot of idle seamen into the Caribbean, which caused problems.
Yeah, it turns out we leave a bunch of unemployed sailors who only know how to sail ships and take prizes, and there's nothing for them to do, and the Navy's not paying real well. Everybody's kind of surprised Pikachu face, and all of a sudden they're all turning to piracy.
Mhm.
That happens all the time. There's another example that was just on my mind because I took a Vietnam War class where it's kind of similar when the Vietnam War ended. A lot of folks came back. There was a lot of distrust with everything that was going on in general, and a lot of the soldiers kind of came back and wasn't a lot of jobs, and you had something very not exact, but it's very similar. So it has happened more than once, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, war ends. There's a lot of extra male energy to be directed to constructive efforts.
hmm Usually, or if you don't give them something to do, they'll find something else to do themselves. In this case, it was piracy.
Needs to be directed. Yes.
Or as he called it, the sloop trade.
Then it moves into Peace After Queen Anne's War, talks about this excessive male labor. Touches on, and then it talks about the treasure fleet disaster of 1715, another pivotal moment in priming piracy. Big hurricane knocked out treasure fleet going back to Spain, and Spanish tried to clean it up and got most of it, but as soon as guys at Port Royal got wind of it, they headed off to try to scoop up that silver, and they did get a lot, a small percentage of what was available, but the Spanish had been salvaging it pretty aggressively. But they were not really under any letter of marque or any official privateer code. So it was really piracy, and they tried to
It
make
was
it
just
look like.
piracy. Good old-fashioned, no frills attached piracy.
But it was English versus Spanish. They weren't attacking English shipping yet. They were pretending that they were loyal.
Mhm.
And that was Jennings. And some of the big names were just on that trip as, like Vane, were on that trip as lowly sailors, not captains yet. But it kind of gave pirates a taste for silver, which is hard to put down once picked up.
And then from there, they just kinda, pop up. They're sailing around many fleets, they start feuding. These are still mainly going after, merchant ships or whatnot. These aren't like the guys in the 17th century where they were going inland for the most part. They were just, kinda going everywhere there was loot. Again, a lot of really frustrated sailors felt really betrayed. They had fought in this war, and then they just kind of said, "Nope, go be farmers or something else." And they said, "Well, absolutely not. We still got our ships and our weapons and everything else. So time to go make our own fortune." So it were.
Yeah, they're just grabbing any ship that wouldn't get them in trouble, pretty much.
hmm
Chapter called Brethren of the Coast, which I thought was kind of a weird title since it's a kind of older term that refers to an earlier group, but it talks about the rise to power of,
Superior
yeah,
group.
superior. Rise to, that's one of, well, we'll get to that. A flaw in the book, I think. Pirates rise to power. They started kind of getting bigger ships. A couple of them got some decent ships like Bellamy and Blackbeard eventually, but and started getting a little fleet. Their fleet would kind of change pretty rapidly. They would get an extra ship would be their supply ship or the fast ship to go chase down little ships. And they were always swapping ships because they didn't ever maintain their ships very well and just let them rot because it was a lot easier to get a new ship. But this is where they started getting bigger ships that were more dangerous to more ships. And then that's chapter it talks about Rogers starting his expedition and getting funding in England to turn Nassau into a more productive colony again and put down the piracy. Impressive how much money he actually raised and then how badly he got screwed later.
Yeah, it's really interesting because he's usually painted as the villain because people like to, pull these pirates up as, the we're robbing the rich because we're frustrated. But if you really think about it, Rogers is actually kind of sort of the good guy.
Yeah.
You know, there's one thing you don't mess with. You don't mess with the money.
Well, yeah, he got screwed on several levels, but he fortunes restored sort of at the end. Yeah, it's pretty admirable goal, I guess. And he wasn't too ruthless about it. He could have been a lot more ruthless, but
Hmm.
yeah, I guess a lot of people's perception of him is probably shaped by seeing him on film because the pirates always have to be
Hmm.
the people you're rooting for. And part of that is the legends or the actuality of Bellamy and his little speech that is recorded. But I'm not I'm not sure if people know if it's exactly true or not, but his Robin Hood of the world.
He's the only one who thought of himself like that. Everybody else is just like, we're here to get rich. And he was the real outlier. If it was true, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, didn't work out too well for him though, but
Yeah, no.
interesting
The
speech to
gods of the
read.
sea decided to flick him out of existence.
Yeah, he's one of the ones that got a bigger ship, but yeah, just wrecked. And interesting parallel to the Spanish treasure ship, the fleet getting wrecked. He gets wrecked up in Massachusetts, and all survivors get tracked down and hung.
That's what we call ironic.
It's interesting reading through this book. I'm always looking out for scenarios that'd be really good for Blood and Plunder, write up a historical scenario. And there's a lot of these that aren't very good scenarios because they're so one-sided. Either the pirates find a merchant ship and take it, or they see a big ship and they run away, and there's not actually that much combat. Bellamy is interesting because there's a couple. I mean, there's some dramatic moments where he like leads his naked crews and piroguas up to a French merchant ship and takes it and learns the vow.
Naked terror.
Naked Terror, you have a scenario on that, don't you?
Uh-huh.
Um, but there's not a lot of pitched battles or actually attacks or assaults, which is strange. We think of the golden age of piracy as dramatic battles and boarding parties, but a lot of it wasn't. And even the little battles that are shown in here, they don't seem very glorious.
The one that I saw that I'm definitely gonna be trying to cook up a scenario for is Blackbeard raiding the city of Guadalupe with
Yeah, what
Queen
about
Anne's
that?
Revenge, where he actually rolls up and unleashes some cannons against the fort and sends guys out, which isn't very common in this era, and I'm surprised that they won. I had the book open here. They seize control of a large French ship that just taken on cargo of sugar, raising her sails and hacking away her anchor lines to make a quick escape. He rolled up, grabbed all the stuff, shotguns to the fort, and then ran off.
Yeah, most of the pirate it doesn't seem that many pirates actually did many land raids. I don't know how it doesn't sound like this was very well defended or very well coordinated for defense, but it's one of the more impressive, if not well documented, examples of a land raid by an 18th century
Mhm.
pirate.
Also shows, in my opinion, how there's this duology with Blackbeard specifically. He's been my favorite pirate for a long time, where you can't really, he's always been painted up as like this really tactical genius, but we also can pretty much say he probably had syphilis, so we don't know how well that was affecting him toward the end. But he always seemed to kind of have a good head on his shoulders. Like when he blockaded Charleston, he knew he couldn't just sit there or else help would come. So he'd show up, get what he needs, and get the hell out. And this seems to be kind of a surprise attack. Show up at night, show up, grab everything, and get out. Because if you just wait there and lay siege, help's going to come. And pirates never performed well against professional fighting sailors.
Yeah. Yeah, people weren't stupid. Next Bonnet excluded, but
I was going to say, Bonnet exists.
yeah, the chapter on Blackbeard, it does touch on Bonnet quite a bit. Ambitious, eager to have the fun and glory of piracy, but not necessarily very smart, lots of money. and kind of taken advantage of by Blackbeard. That is one actual combat scenario. Bonnet attacking a Spanish ship that was way more than he could bite off and getting
Yeah.
wounded for it. We were talking about titles for this series beforehand, and we were suggesting Bonnet's bookshelf or Bonnet's library or something. Probably just inspired by that goofy show. Back to Blackbeard. It doesn't over glorify him, I don't think. It seems kind of sympathetic to him. It makes him look kind of smart. It's interesting how much he uh, messed with the took the pardon and then kind of goofed around afterwards, but tried to
Hmm.
settle down, but didn't really settle down. There's a lot of different theories on how piratey Blackbeard was after the pardon. I don't know what exactly to believe, but this seemed kind of sympathetic to him without being too pro Blackbeard.
I always thought it was interesting that it took an illegal expedition to go and take
Yeah,
him out
what
because
about
I think
that?
the governor Spotswood took years to fighting it in court to prove that it was illegal because technically he had already taken the pardon and they didn't have any real concrete proof that he was still pirating because he was being protected by what colony it was by another colony. Because Spotswood was in Virginia, correct?
Then Eden, right? Was
Yeah.
So he was, yeah, I think it was illegal because he was sending an expedition from one colony into the other. If it's on sea,
Mhm.
great, but he sent troops from North Carolina into, or from Virginia into North Carolina, if I recall correctly, and that was illegal. And the governor of North Carolina didn't enjoy that at all. They didn't do anything. They went to town, but they didn't apprehend anyone. But sending troops from one colony to the
Mhm.
other, that's almost, it wasn't the United States of America, obviously. So sending troops from one to the others would be a high offense to a governor, especially a governor who's dilly dallying around with pirates and trying to make a little money.
Mhm. I think my favorite depiction of that was it's in one of my favorite little videos ever. I think it's called Blackbeard Terror at Sea. It's from way, way back. But it's really funny 'cause there's a scene where it tells, Blackbeard takes a part and the governor's sitting there and he goes, Blackbeard's telling the governor, well, you wouldn't believe we were out trading and we came across a French sloop and by thunder it was empty. So I just did my good deed and brought it back to port. The governor looks at him and says, "Well, you're entitled to a share of the goods for bringing us this errant vessel." And he goes, "Oh, is that so?" It's so funny. They knew they were in on it, but it's so great. It's a little outdated. Great show. Should watch it.
That's awesome.
Fantastic. But I love that energy where he was obviously, kind of just doing some little low key piracy on the side because he just go take a ship and say, "Oh, I just found it," and nobody was on it because he usually killed everyone or sent them off in a rowboat and said, "I just found it. I
Yeah.
guess this is yours now, Mister Governor." And the governor go, "Oh, you brought me a new toy. Here's a share of it for your good deed." And everybody in Virginia is going, "That's not how it works."
And it continues talking about how other pirates interacted with the pardon. Some of them tried to go straight or went pirate hunters, um, more or less successfully. Some of them seem to teeter back or go back into piracy,
Hmm.
or push the limits of piracy, try to be privateers, but still cross the line a little bit. Hard to stop once you start, I guess. Or sometimes it's when you have a crew to satisfy and you see a target and you kind of need it to be a legitimate target. I could see the difficulty in making a choice. Same thing for kid, right?
Hmm.
And after that, the hunting started to become more successful than the pirating, especially after Blackbeard falls. It's not much left besides people like Bartholomew Roberts who tend to go over to Africa rather than mess around in the Caribbean or the Atlantic coast there.
Hmm. Just good move. When things get hot, you get
Yeah.
the hell out.
Interesting that a lot of the pirate hunters either they're basically privateers looking for rewards, they're private enterprises. Even the group that actually attacked and took out Blackbeard, and the attack on Blackbeard is a pretty fun account here. It's not very many pages, but I'm gonna probably mostly just take it. Well, there's some actual recorded information on that besides Charles Johnson, but it's a fun chapter with heads hanging by strings and stuff. But that expedition, Maynard it was pretty much privately funded, and it wasn't an official Royal Navy expedition. Interesting how governors who wanted stuff done just paid for it rather than wait for all the other bureaucracy from England.
Nobody ever talks about how lucky he got either. He shows up, he runs aground, he has to get his ship off the sandbar while Blackbeard's shooting at him with his cannons. And he threw all his men below deck when Blackbeard, the only miscalculation he's ever seen to have made was boarding that damn sloop. Because if he just sat back and pelted them, that was it. They were dead to rights. But he got greedy, went in, and died in glorious hand-to-hand combat. That always kind of baffled me with how, he could have just sat back. I played the Blackbeard scenario, and I won just by sitting back and shooting. I don't need to board that ship. I need them to stop moving. If I know a pirate hunter is coming after me, there's no goods on there. I'm just gonna sink it. So I don't like how that's never brought up, but that seems like be the one real miscalculation that was done. But hey, it cost him his head, and Maynard got very little out of it, actually.
Yeah, well, if there's two ships coming and he doesn't know how many people are on it, and if they take a ship, he's stuck there, and then he's pretty much toast. So he has to get going somehow, and half his crew might be tipsy or drunk and not very useful. So
Right.
it's easy to armchair pirate, but yeah, I don't know what his options were,
Mhm.
but it didn't work out well for him, did it?
Yeah,
He
did
did
not.
earn himself a place of prominence on the bowsprit, but
Yeah, and the only one of the few pirates to actually go out swinging and then,
that's true.
eat a cannonball or just surrender.
More glorious than hanging, I guess, but
Yeah.
body thrown in the
Throw in the sea, swim around 89 times, triple backflip out of the water. You know how the legends
yeah,
go.
yeah, probably still swimming around.
Uh-huh.
Touches on Jack Rackham, kind of a last gasp, pathetic gasp of piracy.
Yeah, if you can call it that.
Yeah, pretty.
Black Sails is the best thing ever happened to Jack Rackham ever.
Yeah, there's a Jack Rackham
Sorry, we keep getting out into the
mini
weeds.
scenario for Blood and Plunder in the War Games Illustrated, I think, or War Games. No, what's it called? It's the kind of retail magazine for uh, game game store magazine. I forget what it's called, WTB or something. But there's a little Jack Rackham scenario in there if you happen to get an edition of that from I think spring 2024. Anyway, pirates petered out. Too much trouble to become a pirate. Everybody's getting killed. So doesn't paint Maynard as that much of a hero. He was the oldest
Mhm.
lieutenant. Is that right?
Something like that.
He wasn't promoted to a commander for another 21 years. He was like he was like 60 when he became a commander.
But I kill Blackbeard. Doesn't
Hmm.
count.
So we should paint his hair gray in Blood and Plunder.
Yes, agreed. Make him old and decrepit. He should have the heat stroke special rule. Mm.
Well, he got the job done.
Heresy. All right. So, Joseph, we're going to start with you. What do you think your strengths of this book are? What are the things that you enjoyed about the book?
Obviously, a good overview of the era. Good that it focuses on some major characters. There's so many people you could talk about. It has to make choices and focus on some. So I think it does that well. It doesn't overglorify them. It doesn't might be a little bit more sympathetic than an upright man should be, but it doesn't make them sound that heroic or skilled for that matter. So I think that's accurate. It doesn't make nobilize them too much. I think it's pretty focused. I mean, it's a complicated era of history if you zoom out to the larger picture of the whole new world or even sneaking into Europe. So I think it does a good job at keeping focused. That might be a little bit of a weakness too to understand the era, but it's focused and it's quite an easy and enjoyable read. I highly recommend just listening to this on Audible. It's entertaining and it's not too complex read. How about you?
Like I said in the beginning, I think it's a really good overview for those just getting into the history of kind of the Caribbean piracy. If you're starting with the well-known names, it's kind of a good place to start. And even if you as a reader is familiar with the era, there's some new tidbits that you'll be like, oh, I didn't know that. But if you're familiar with the era, you get some new tidbits. It's a really easy read too. So like if you're not a reader, this is a real something really easy to get into. Even if you listen to it on audiobook, it's super easy to digest.
How about weaknesses? Where do you think this book might not fulfill its goal or not portray things accurately?
So for me, it kind of sticks to the 18th century. When I started playing Plunder, I was a total like, I can't wait to get to the 18th century. And then as I've researched and read books and just done kind of my homework, I've become a 17th century supremacist. Fight me. So it only hyper focuses on that, which I think is a less interesting topic than the guys who were out actually raiding towns and Lord Mr. Graf who could go 1-to-1 with the Armada Bavavento and run away in a favorable position. The guys had a lot of martial capability. So they just kind of stick to these kind of more bully pirates ish. And for me, I really like the nitty gritty. I like to get into the details. I don't want to know, oh, this battle happened here and here. I want to know the movements. I want to know what the lead up was. And that it doesn't really go into that with this. If you're in the nitty gritty details, this is not the book for you. It's kind of a really general overview of the big players.
Yeah, like I said, it's focused on a very specific group and locale and era, and doesn't really. It gives the introduction, talks a little bit about the lead up, not really further back from Avery, and there's the 18th century or 17th century has so much background and other interesting things happen. It doesn't really acknowledge those
Better pirates.
better pirates. Yeah, doesn't really acknowledge that, and I think it over glorifies the pirates a little bit by overstating their influence and power. In the introduction, first chapter, the pirate gangs of the Bahamas were enormously successful. At their zenith, they succeeded in severing Britain, France, and Spain from their New World empires, cutting off trade routes, stifling the supply of slaves to the sugar plantations of America and the West Indies, and disrupting the flow of information between the continents. I believe that's overstated by a couple.
I'm inclined to agree.
So I think he enjoys his topic a little too much and
He's
very
enthusiastic.
enthusiastic about the topic, which is good, but it was a fairly small blip on the larger picture of history, and it's interesting and fun. And it did have influence, but maybe not cutting off all the Europe from the New World empires. That might be a little much. And the introduction, I was listening to it. I've listened to this thing twice on Audible and read it now two and a half, a couple times. So I've read this quite a few times. Introduction kind of bothers me. Any historian that paints the past in a wide brush of ignorance and stupidity, it kind of bothers me. People have always been people, and what we learn and know changes, and things are different than they were back then. But people were always been people, and kind of looking down on them just because they were born 300 years ago bothers me overall in historical writing. So that bugged me a little bit, but I'll try to overlook it.
I'm inclined to agree. We were talking before we started recording. I was, I didn't get that. Then I went and scanned through and, yeah, you're right. Kind of paints him as stupid, superstitious, filthy.
People always look superstitious when you look backwards.
Hmm.
I think it's a great read with those things in mind. I think it's easy read and it's very accessible. It's, I guess, very well respected. I'm not sure. But if you want to read more on the topic or alternatives, what would be some titles that are related for the 18th century pirates?
So for the 18th century, and really good one. I know we have a list here. I'm going to kind of skip to the front. Golden Age of Piracy by Benderson Little. I think this is more if you're into the nitty gritty and details and really kind of about pirate myth busting. This is a really good, solid follow up to this. Benderson Little is amazing. I cannot vouch for him enough. I love the way he writes. He is so knowledgeable. If there is media out there about pirates, there's a good chance that if you throw a stone at pirate media, you'll hit something that Benderson Little's touched a little bit.
Yeah, definitely more focus on the whole big picture of piracy and the New World. I think this book, Republic of Pirates, is a better introduction. This gives you kind of the historical narrative in a more cohesive way, where Benderson Little's book is kind of choppy, where it looks at different topics and doesn't go in a chronological order. But it is a more accurate, probably book, more historically informed book, Golden Age of Piracy. The Pirate Menace is a brand new book, kind of covering similar ground by Angus Constam. It just came out 2024. I started reading it and then took a break so I could review this, so we could review it. Constam is more of a focused pirate historian as well. So I expect a little more balance, taking more sources and a bigger picture into consideration. So would I would guess it's going to be a more accurate and better read overall. But I haven't finished it yet, so can't vouch for it. And I'm just an amateur historian
Yeah, I'm
anyway.
3
So
chapters in so far.
and then Under the Black Flag by David Cordingly is a similar topic. What's the base? You've read that more recently than me. Does that look more at Blackbeard in specific, or what's the
It's kinda similar to Golden Age of Piracy. It kind of does the same thing. It's just and no disrespect to David Cordingly for Under the Black Flag. No disrespect to him. It's not as thorough in my opinion, but it does do a really good job of myth busting. It's kinda like this where it does a general overview because it goes into, "Oh, well, pirates didn't actually sail in, multi-deck warships. They actually preferred sloops." But he doesn't have all the technical know-how in my opinion, but he's got the general. It would be good if you're gonna rank them, start with this, then go into Under the Black Flag, and then go into Golden Age of Piracy. And that will kind of get you covered in its entirety.
And if you're allergic to books, there's a couple TV shows that are maybe not as accurate, but there's that Netflix show. What's that one called? I know most people already watched it by now.
I think I want to say like the Republic of Pirates or something like that.
It sounds awfully familiar.
Let me consult the interwebs. The Pirate Republic or something. Hang on, let me double check. The Lost Pirate
There you
Kingdom.
go. A little more dramatic even than this, but
Yeah, I feel like it might have been based a little loosely on this book maybe because I got some similar vibes.
Mhm.
It's a good watch if you just want, something to put on while you're painting. Like everything, it does have issues.
Yeah.
Some of the acting is okay, but there's production issues where you can totally tell that, it's a replica gun they have in the thing. They couldn't be bothered to at least paint the flint to make it look real. There's a lot of, kind of painting up the pirates to be the good guys when really weren't.
Over
I'm
dramatizing
of the
things
opinion
for the
that at this
screen's sake. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I'm of the opinion that in the new world at this point there are no good guys, just pick your favorite train wreck and go. But it's still a pretty good watch. If you're looking for more entertainment, I always recommend Black Sails. It did air on Stars, so it is a little raunchy, so be warned that it's a prequel to Treasure Island. But it has some little historical tie-ins there that once you read these books, you'll be like, "Hey, I know what that is. Hey, that seems pretty cool."
If you know the real
But
story, you can at
otherwise,
least see what they're working with in Black Sails, but they, yeah, do their own thing
yeah.
for sure.
And Benderson was a consultant on that show as well.
I bet he was a mad consultant.
I'm sure.
I can't imagine. Must have been hard. But good on him for helping.
I just want to mention there's one more show that's on
Oh, yeah.
Hulu that's called like Pirates: The Truth Behind the Legends that just aired. I want to say like a couple weeks ago, and it's also I've been watching it. Pretty good. Good watch. You should watch it.
Has an episode on Blackbeard and Bonnie and Mary Read. Oh, they didn't even include Rackham in the title. Savage.
Yeah. Again, Black Sails is the best thing that ever happened to Jack Rackham. Fight me.
If he had fought like a man, he wouldn't have been ignored like a dog.
Haha.
Well, thanks for joining us for a review of this book. Reading history is one of my pet hobbies. Even if you haven't before, I recommend picking up a history book and enjoying some of the real material behind Blood and Plunder. Even if you aren't a bit, if you just like number crunching in games, learning the history is beneficial and makes the whole experience more enjoyable. Next episode, we are planning to look at one of Dan's favorite, everybody's favorite books in Blood and Plunder world, the Sea Rover's Practice by the aforementioned Benderson.
It's so good. I have a signed copy and it's gonna be buried with me.
I think we're giving away a copy during the Summer of Plunder right now as well. We always do.
Yeah, I'm super excited for that. It was a really good book. I tore through it and chewed into it. It has all the nitty-gritty details. Oh, I cannot wait. Once we get that up, I'm gonna be so happy because it was such a good
You're
book.
making me review it again. It's been like
If you really
6
wanna
years
know
since I read it. 5 years?
yeah, you'll have to read fast.
I can do it.
Get another copy so you can write notes in it.
Whoa. Another copy. I write notes on all of them.
But yeah, that one's more about the tactics and like the procedures that were used, and I find it really fascinating because Benderson Little is so knowledgeable and he goes into all the nitty-gritty details, and it's just it's a good book. I love it.
All right, we better sign off and get back to reading. Thanks for joining us for this episode. of what are we calling this show again?
Plundering the past.
Plundering the Past. Thanks for joining us for this first episode of Plundering the Past. For more Blood and Plunder content, check out our blog, flagship blog, bloodandpigment.com, and we got all sorts of Blood and Plunder material up there. Check out our YouTube channel as well, which you're on if you're listening to this, probably, and our main podcast. And if you enjoy our content, check out our Patreon if you want to give us some of your hard-earned Spanish treasure.
And as always, keep your dice ready, the wind at your back, Yarharr, and read those pages.
In the library so grand and old, there sat a book of tales untold, of piracy on the Spanish main, in deeds of fear and fame. Soon may the postman come to bring us books on pirate scum. We'll read and read until we snooze with a pint of tea or booze. The pages spoke of ships and seas, of treasures and of great victories, the battles fought and plunder won in the age of pirate fun. Soon may the postman come to bring us books on pirate scum. We'll read and read until we snooze with a pint of tea or booze. And as I close a final page and the thought of the life of the pirate age, the freedom of the open seas, but dysentery. Soon may the postman come to bring us books on pirate scum. We'll read and read until we snooze with a pint of tea or booze. Soon may the postman come to bring us books on pirate scum. We'll read and read until we snooze with a pint of tea or booze.